You're making us look bad, Bennett. The other crews are already 2 days ahead. I didn't look up from my clipboard, just kept checking the pressure gauges on the main drill shaft, making notes in columns that had to match up perfectly or we'd have problems. Big ones. My name's Cal Bennett, 48 years old with 22 of those spent on offshore rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. I was the senior safety inspector for Ravencrest Platform 6, 50 miles off the coast of Galveston, the kind of place where mistakes don't just cost money, they cost lives. Chase Darnell stood there in his spotless coveralls, arms crossed, waiting for me to acknowledge him. He'd been our rig supervisor for exactly 3 weeks. Young guy, maybe 35. The Houston office sent him out with buzzwords like production efficiency and operational streamlining. I'd seen his type before. These secondary valve assemblies are showing irregular pressure patterns, I said, still not looking up. Need to run a full diagnostic before the night crew takes over. Jesus Christ, Chase muttered. That'll take 4 hours, we're already behind schedule. Yep. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even though the thundering machinery around us would have drowned out a shotgun blast. Look, I get that you're the old hand here, but corporate's breathing down my neck about output. We need to be pumping, not checking and rechecking equipment that was serviced last month. I finally looked up at him. His clean-shaven face was already developing the weathered look that the salt air gives you out here. But his eyes still had that mainland gleam, someone who thought of this rig as numbers on a spreadsheet, not as the metal island where 16 men slept at night. The primary coupling's showing wear patterns it shouldn't have after just 4 weeks, I said. Either the replacement parts aren't up to spec, or someone's been pushing the system past tolerances when I'm off shift. Or maybe the equipment's fine and you're being overly cautious, Chase said. I've been going through your logs. You file more safety reports than the other 3 platforms combined. I tucked my clipboard under my arm. That so? Yeah, that's so. And I've got to wonder if that's because this rig has more problems or because you're creating paperwork to justify your position. I just nodded, like I was considering his words carefully. But something in my gut tightened. I'd been feeling it for weeks now, that slow-building pressure that tells you something's wrong long before the gauges do. I'll have the report on your desk by end of shift, I said, turning back to the valves. Make it quick, he said. We've got drilling targets to hit. He walked away and I watched him go. The pit in my stomach grew deeper. I came up through the ranks the old way. Started as a roughneck when I was 26. After 5 years in the Navy taught me how machines worked and how they failed. Back then, the Gulf was like the Wild West. Companies cutting corners, men losing fingers, or worse. My 3rd year, I watched a pressure valve blow on an adjacent platform. The explosion killed 3 men. One of them had shown me pictures of his newborn daughter the night before. After that, I got religious about safety protocols, studied every manual, took night classes in mechanical engineering, worked my way up to equipment specialist, then safety officer. Got a reputation as the guy who wouldn't sign off on drilling until everything checked out. Some crews hated me for it at first, until they realized I was protecting their lives more than the company's equipment. My ex-wife Vanessa never understood why I turned down promotions to management positions on shore. You could wear a tie, have weekends off, she'd say. But she didn't get that I needed to be on the platforms, eyes on the machinery. Can't inspect a drill bit from a desk in Houston. When she left 8 years ago, she said it was because of the 14-day rotations away from home. But I knew it was really because even when I was home, my mind was often still offshore, thinking about procedure adjustments or maintenance schedules. Some men are built for family life. I was built for keeping other men alive. 2 months before Chase showed up, I started noticing changes. New equipment arriving with inspection certificates but no actual inspection marks. Maintenance logs with signatures but no detailed notes. Supply orders getting altered after I submitted them, cheaper parts substituted. I brought it up with my old supervisor, Gary Hamilton. Budget cuts, he explained with a grimace. Corporate's squeezing every platform since the price drop last year. These aren't places to cut, I said. We're talking core safety equipment. Gary just shook his head. I've pushed back, Cal. Got nowhere. They're bringing in some new blood to optimize operations. That's the exact phrase they used. 2 weeks later, Gary was gone. Offered early retirement. The crew threw him a goodbye party in the mess hall. He pulled me aside before boarding the helicopter. Watch yourself, Cal, he said quietly. They're looking for people who'll sign off on their changes, not question them. I nodded. I know. He gripped my shoulder. Document everything. Every shortcut, every substitution. Build a record. I took his advice to heart, though I didn't yet know how important it would become. The morning it all came to a head, I was running checks on the blowout preventer, the massive set of valves designed to seal the wellbore if pressure control was lost. Last line of defense against a catastrophic failure, the kind that had killed 11 men and spilled millions of barrels of oil in 2010, just 100 miles from where I was standing. My assistant, Jason Parker, was helping me run the diagnostic sequence when I noticed it. The hydraulic fluid levels were low, too low, and the fluid that was there had particulate contamination, tiny metal shavings that shouldn't be there indicating internal wear. This has been serviced, right? I asked Jason, though I already knew the answer from the maintenance log I'd reviewed. Yes, sir, he said. Last week, while you were on shore, Mr. Darnell signed off on it personally. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. A supervisor signing off on mechanical work was unusual, almost unheard of. Go get me the replacement parts inventory, I said quietly. The ones checked out for this service. Jason returned 15 minutes later with the inventory sheet. One glance told me everything. They'd used aftermarket parts, cheaper, unauthorized components that didn't meet the manufacturer's specifications. The kind of corner cutting that would save thousands in the short term, but could cost millions, and lives, if things went wrong. I took photographs with my phone, added them to the file I'd been building for months. Then I called for a full testing shutdown of the BOP system. Within an hour, Chase stormed into the testing area. What the hell is this? He demanded. We're in the middle of a drilling sequence. Blowout preventer isn't functioning properly, I said evenly. We need to replace components and run a full recertification. Bullshit, he spat. It was just serviced. I signed off on it myself. Yeah, I nodded. That's part of the problem. His face flushed. Meaning what? Meaning whoever did that service used non-spec parts. Meaning whoever signed off on it either didn't know what they were looking at or didn't care. The crew around us had gone quiet, watching the confrontation unfold. You're done, Bennett, Chase said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. Pack your gear. You're on the afternoon helicopter. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. Just handed the testing equipment to Jason and said, full workup. Document everything you find. Chase followed me as I walked toward the accommodation block. You think you're indispensable because you've been here forever. But you're just expensive and slow. We have schedules to meet, production quotas. Your constant safety paranoia is costing this company money. I stopped and turned to him. You know what costs money? Funerals. Lawsuits, environmental cleanup. He jabbed a finger at my chest. You're fired. For insubordination and disrupting operations. No severance. I just nodded, then continued to my quarters to pack. As I stuffed clothes into my duffel bag, I felt strangely calm. This confrontation had been coming since the day Chase arrived. I'd seen the pattern, understood what was happening. Corporate was pushing for faster drilling, more production, higher profits. And Chase was their hammer, breaking anything that got in the way, including safety protocols. But they'd made a critical mistake. They thought I was just a stubborn old-timer standing in the way of progress. They had no idea what I'd been doing for the past 8 months. The helicopter ride back to Galveston was loud, the way it always is. But for the first time in years, my mind wasn't filled with work thoughts. pressure readings, maintenance schedules, crew rotations. Instead, I was thinking about next steps. My apartment felt empty when I got home. Dusty. I'd been on a 21-day extended rotation, covering for another inspector who'd broken his leg. 3 weeks on the platform, and now suddenly, nothing. No job to return to after my 7 days off. I showered, ordered a pizza, and opened my laptop. First, I backed up all the photos, documents, and notes I'd collected over the past months to an external drive. Then I drafted an email to the Human Resources Department at Ravencrest Energy. This letter serves as a formal complaint regarding unsafe working conditions and deliberate safety violations on Platform 6. I have documented numerous instances where critical equipment has been improperly maintained, safety protocols have been circumvented, and legitimate concerns have been dismissed. I attached 20 pages of documentation with dates, specific violations, and photographic evidence. Then I hit send and went to bed. 3 days passed before I got a response. Not from HR, but from Lawrence Wilson, Ravencrest's corporate legal counsel. The message was brief, professional, and clearly crafted to shut me down. Mr. Bennett, we have received your complaint and conducted a thorough internal review. Our findings indicate that all operations on Platform 6 are being conducted within acceptable safety parameters. Your termination was due to documented performance issues and creating unnecessary delays in production. Any further communication containing unfounded accusations against Ravencrest Energy may result in legal action for defamation. Regards, Lawrence Wilson, Chief Legal Officer. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I wasn't surprised, but some part of me had hoped the company might actually care about the safety issues I'd flagged. Stupid, really. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Alex Reeves, a former colleague who now worked for Blue Water Offshore, a competitor. We met for lunch at a seafood place near the harbor. Ravencrest has been cutting corners for months, Alex said, picking at his grilled fish. It's not just your platform, they're under pressure from shareholders after that dry well they hit last quarter. Stock's down 18%. They're going to get someone killed, I said. Alex nodded. Probably, but unless something happens, they'll keep pushing the limits. He lowered his voice. Look, Cal, we might have a position opening up next month. Senior safety specialist. Not quite what you were doing, but... Thanks, I said. But I think I need to see this through first. My second call was to the regional office of the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. I'd been sending them copies of my reports all along. It was standard procedure. But I needed to make sure they understood what was happening. The woman who answered listened politely, then transferred me to her supervisor, who listened for about 30 seconds before cutting me off. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your concern, but we don't investigate platforms based on the complaints of recently terminated employees without substantial evidence. I have the evidence, I said. 8 months of documentation. We receive hundreds of complaints every year, he said. Most turn out to be disgruntled workers or internal disputes. We have scheduled inspections. If there are issues on Platform 6, they'll be identified. By then it could be too late, I said. I understand your frustration, but we have procedures to follow. Good day, Mr. Bennett. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, feeling the weight of what I was up against. A corporation with billions on the line. Government agencies with limited resources and mountains of bureaucracy. And me. Just one man with a file full of violations that nobody wanted to see. Until they had to. 2 weeks after my firing, I was still working through my options when Jason Parker called. It was his first time off the rig since I'd left. Cal? He said, his voice low, even though he was surely calling from land. Things are bad out there. We met at a diner far from the usual industry hangouts. Jason looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He glanced around before sliding a USB drive across the table. They've ramped up production by 30%, he said. Working the drill motors at max capacity 24/7. The vibration is causing microfractures in the secondary containment systems. I pocketed the drive. Chase knows? Jason nodded. He says it's within operational parameters. But Cal, he leaned forward. Last week we had a pressure spike that nearly triggered an emergency shutdown. Instead of investigating the cause, Chase had the alarm sensitivity reduced. My jaw tightened. Is anyone else speaking up? Nobody who wants to keep their job. Jason stared into his coffee. There's something else. I was in Chase's office dropping off reports and his computer was open. There was an email from someone at corporate, detailed instructions about what maintenance to skip, what inspections to fast track. This isn't just Chase, it's coming from headquarters. That night I reviewed the files Jason had given me. Equipment logs, pressure readings, inspection reports with forged signatures. But the most damning was a video he'd secretly recorded of Chase instructing the night crew to bypass a safety valve during a high-pressure drilling operation, a direct violation of federal regulations that could result in criminal charges. I couldn't go back to the BSEE with just my word against Ravencrest. But with this new evidence, especially the video, I had something concrete. Something they couldn't ignore. The next morning, I drove to New Orleans to the regional headquarters of the BSEE. I'd called ahead and arranged a meeting with Diana Foster, a senior enforcement officer. Unlike the supervisor I'd spoken to earlier, she examined every document, watched the video twice, and took extensive notes. This is extremely concerning, Mr. Bennett, she said finally, especially given Ravencrest's safety history. Their safety history? She eyed me carefully, then turned her computer screen so I could see it. It showed an internal BSEE database with Ravencrest Energy's compliance record. There were dozens of violations over the past 3 years, most with minimal fines paid, none made public. They've been on our watch list, Diana explained. But they're careful. They spread the violations across different platforms, different divisions. Never enough in one place to trigger a full investigation. Where she scrolled down to Platform 6. Until now, perhaps. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold anger build inside me. This wasn't just about cutting corners to save money. This was systematic, calculated. They knew exactly how far they could push before facing serious consequences, and they'd been dancing on that line for years. They fired me for doing my job, I said quietly, for trying to keep people safe. Diana closed the database and folded her hands. Mr. Bennett, I want to be clear about something. If we pursue this, Ravencrest will fight back hard. They have teams of lawyers and deep pockets. They'll try to discredit you, paint you as disgruntled, incompetent, maybe even suggest you tampered with evidence. I met her gaze. I've got nothing to hide. 22 years in the industry, clean record. She nodded. Good, because I'm going to need you to go on record. Formal statements, possibly testimony if it goes that far. Whatever it takes, I said. There's a process to this, she warned. We can't just shut them down tomorrow. I understand, but those men on that platform, they're running out of time. For the next 3 weeks, I worked closely with Diana Foster and her team at the BSEE. I walked them through every piece of evidence, explained the technical details of each violation, and helped them understand the cumulative risk that was building on Platform 6. Meanwhile, I stayed in touch with Jason, who kept sending updates from the rig. Things were getting worse. They'd had 2 more near misses with the pressure systems, and Chase was pushing them to drill even faster, taking shortcuts that left the crew increasingly nervous. Half the guys want to request transfers, Jason told me during one of our calls. But they're afraid of being blacklisted. Tell them to document everything, I said, and be ready. Diana had explained the process to me. First, they'd conduct an unannounced inspection, but it would be limited in scope, focused on routine compliance. Based on what they found, they could justifiably expand into a comprehensive review. We need to make sure our case is bulletproof, she said. These companies have fought us in court before and won when we've overstepped. I understood the bureaucratic dance, but it was hard to be patient knowing what was happening out there. Then Diana called with news. "We've scheduled the initial inspection for next Tuesday," she said. "But there's a complication. Someone from Ravencrest's legal team reached out to our director. They know something's coming." "They'll hide the evidence," I said immediately. "Probably," she agreed, "which is why we need to adjust our approach. I'm sending a regulatory specialist who's also a certified mechanical engineer, someone who can spot problems even if they've been temporarily patched up." The day before the inspection, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, checked my phone constantly for updates from Jason. Around midnight, he texted, "Chase has everyone working overtime cleaning up, not fixing anything, just hiding problems." I forwarded the message to Diana, who responded immediately. "Expected. Our team is prepared." The inspection team flew out to Platform 6 early Tuesday morning. By procedure, I wasn't allowed to join them or have direct contact during the inspection, so I waited in Diana's office reviewing documentation and preparing for whatever they found. Hours passed. The team was supposed to return by 3 p.m., but at 4:30, there was still no word. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "BOP failed test. Inspector extending review. Chase going ballistic." Had to be from Jason or someone else on the crew. I showed Diana, who nodded grimly. "That's Anthony's focus area, blowout preventers. If he's extending the review, he found something significant." At 6:12 p.m., Diana's phone rang. She listened for several minutes, asking occasional questions, while I tried to interpret her expression. When she hung up, she looked at me with grim satisfaction. "They found enough for a Level 3 review. Multiple serious violations, including the compromised BOP system you flagged. Anthony said it would have failed catastrophically under genuine emergency conditions. What happens now?" "We're shutting down drilling operations as of tomorrow morning," she said. "Full regulatory intervention. Every system will be inspected, every maintenance log reviewed, every part tested." I let out a long breath. "And Chase?" "Anthony said he was belligerent during the inspection, tried to prevent them from testing certain systems, claimed they were recently certified. That behavior alone triggers additional scrutiny." She gathered her papers. "This is just the beginning, Cal. Once we start digging, I expect we'll find much more." I nodded, feeling both vindication and a strange emptiness. The fight wasn't over. It was just moving into a new phase. But for the first time in months, I felt like I'd done what I was supposed to do, what I was trained to do. Protect the men on that rig, even when nobody else would. The full regulatory intervention lasted 4 weeks. Every day brought new revelations: falsified maintenance records, substandard replacement parts, disabled alarms, unauthorized modifications to critical safety systems. The BSEE inspectors found over 78 serious violations, more than they'd ever documented on a single platform. I was called in repeatedly to provide context and technical expertise. Each time I walked into the BSEE offices, I passed lawyers from Ravencrest Energy, their faces growing grimmer by the day. Twice I saw Chase Darnell in the waiting area. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Diana kept me updated on the findings and the escalating consequences. "We've issued daily fines of $1.2 million for continued non-compliance," she told me one afternoon. "And we've expanded the investigation to 3 other Ravencrest platforms based on what we found." The story hit the industry press first, then national news. Major safety violations shut down Gulf Oil platform. Ravencrest stock plunged as investors panicked about potential liabilities and regulatory actions across their operations. Then came the day of the formal hearing. The Department of the Interior had convened a special panel to review the BSEE's findings and determine final penalties. The room was packed with government officials, industry representatives, and media. I sat quietly in the back, watching as Diana and her team presented their evidence. Projection screens showed the deteriorated equipment, the bypassed safety systems, the falsified documentation. Then they played Jason's video of Chase explicitly instructing the crew to ignore safety protocols. The chairman of the panel asked, Where did this video come from? Diana looked back at me, then answered, a crew member who was concerned about safety violations, one of several who have provided evidence. Chase, sitting with the Ravencrest legal team, turned and finally saw me. The blood drained from his face as understanding dawned. He whispered urgently to the lawyer beside him, who just shook his head. Too late. Much too late. The panel's decision was unanimous. Maximum penalties on all violations, mandatory supervised reconstruction of all safety systems, and a criminal referral for the most egregious breaches of federal safety regulations. Ravencrest Platform 6 would remain shut down indefinitely. 3 months after the hearing, I stood on the deck of the Blue Water Horizon platform, watching a helicopter approach through the morning haze. The rotors kicked up spray as it descended onto the helipad, and a group of men in bright safety vests ducked out beneath the blades. New trainees for our safety program. My program. After the Ravencrest incident made headlines, job offers had come in from across the industry. But Alex Reeves at Blue Water had made the most interesting proposal: build a new safety compliance division from the ground up, with me as director. Total authority over inspection protocols, maintenance standards, and training. The industry's spooked, Alex had said. Nobody wants to be the next Ravencrest. We're turning safety from a cost center into a selling point with clients and regulators. I'd taken the job on one condition: I could bring in my own team. Jason Parker was my first hire, followed by 4 other crew members from Platform 6 who'd been quietly supporting my documentation efforts all along. The trainees gathered in the orientation room, and I stepped to the front. No PowerPoint, no fancy presentation, just hard-earned knowledge. My name's Cal Bennett. For 22 years I've worked these platforms, seen good operations and bad ones. The difference isn't usually equipment or technology. It's people willing to speak up when something's not right. I saw recognition dawn on a few faces. They'd heard about Ravencrest, about the whistleblower who'd brought down a corner-cutting operation. Chase Darnell got 8 months in a minimum security prison, I continued. Ravencrest Energy paid over $200 million in fines and still hasn't reopened Platform 6. All because they thought safety protocols were just red tape. I looked at each of them in turn. Out here there are no small mistakes. You're the last line of defense. For yourselves, for your crew, for the Gulf. Never forget that. As I spoke, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Not the burden of responsibility. I'd carry that willingly for the rest of my career. But the weight of fighting alone. Now I had a crew, a mission, and the authority to make it matter.